Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Before we begin, I just want to say, no FD signifier, you're not crazy. This conversation is happening. But CJ, I think there's going to be more people who are familiar with you than are familiar with me who are going to click on this, given that you're an exclusive figure who is rarely interviewed.
Right.
So my question would be, of all the people and of all the times, I guess, how did you end up in this conversation?
That's a good question, I guess. I've known about you for a minute. I guess I knew about you. Well, okay, the truth is that I started researching Jordan Peterson about in February. I've always been vaguely aware that there's some sort of like strands of DNA between his and my work in common. And then I made the decision. I kind of had an angle. I was like, let me poke into this area and kind of like figure out how deep that commonality and where the divergence is. So I started doing that. I started researching Jordan Peterson. That was in February. I thought it was going to be a quick run, but very quickly, like it's turned into like kind of a useful like matrix through which to explore a bunch of philosophy that I want to talk about. And it's like a cipher for me to talk about like culture and like everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, like the last 10 years or whatever.
Because he's correct on everything metaphysically, right? Not politically.
I don't know.
Metaphysically.
We could talk about it. Depends what you think
we will, yeah.
Metaphysically. But no, at this point, he's just become like it's just my subject matter. It's a muse, you know what I mean? Like when Defunctland picks like a subject, you're there for the Defunctland video and whatever. You know what I mean? It's not the subject, but it's a clickable subject. Anyways, the goddamn point is that at some point I was clicking around looking for Jordan Peterson fans like on YouTube, and I found your channel. And so I was watching some of your videos, and then also I'd actually had seen you before because you had interviewed Jane Gatsby, who's a personal friend, like a contact of mine. So anyways, I just knew your face. And then anyways, I don't know. I don't know. I just saw you very, very temporarily out of the corner of my vision at some point. Right. And then, anyways, and then one time I saw your name in like my live chat, like I was doing a live stream and you were like,
yep, I remember. I have that clipped.
Like,
is that PF Jung, actual PF Jung? I was like, oh man.
Anyways, and then you were like, I'm a patron. And then at some point, I think, I don't know what happened, but I guess I saw that I was watching some JJ McCullough stuff and I saw you talking to JJ and those were good conversations, I thought. And then I saw your League of Legends videos and they were funny. And then you put me in one. And then I was like, and then I started watching your other videos. I was in several.
Yeah, you're I clip a lot of your stuff as solid reference material.
So that's like the answer is you flattery gets you very far.
That's fair. Okay. Write that down.
And I want to talk to Jordan Peterson fans because
it's
been such a journey. And
you and Jordan Peterson were the only S tier enlightened centrists.
Yes, and to be clear, Jordan Peterson was also D tier for people watching.
Yeah, that's true.
As you were ranking the centrists, and I thought that was funny. The first two,
yeah,
Jordan S tier, Jordan D tier, which I
Peterson pre-coma S tier, Peterson post-coma, Twitter.
I think that difference is exaggerated.
Extraordinaire, maybe. Well. Let me ask you, because obviously Jordan Peterson is the intersection. I view you as taking the deepest ideas of Jordan Peterson and conveying them to people who would not listen to me, but would listen to you.
Do you think it's because you've made like 40 videos on transgender 13-year-olds? Is that why they don't want to engage?
It's not 40, but it's more than 10.
Yeah. Do you ever think that maybe your
I do think that. Yeah. I think that our absolute boy William James and the pragmatists, the whole philosophical temperament thing.
Yes. Oh yeah. That's a good point. So for people watching, by the way, William James is a pragmatist philosopher. I'm a fan. He's also a psychologist, but like he opened his pragmatism lectures in 1907. It's just talking about how philosophy is a lot predicated on temperament. That like just artists tend to be liberal and like fucking I don't know, good worker bees tend to be conservative or whatever shit like that, right? People that are high in disgust or conservative, but he was talking about from the philosophical temperament perspective. So it's like there's like from his perspective, there's kind of like a rationalist and empiricist camp. So like the rationalists kind of are like more intellectual and want everything to be like ordered, and like the empiricists, whatever the fuck. I don't remember
I know it's rationalist versus empiricist.
Predicated on their personalities is the idea, which actually in the before times which is why I call Jordan Peterson pre 2015-14 about like Peterson's like 90s research was like 80% just grunt work, just like churning out study after study on shit like this. Just like we studied people with this personality trait and turns out they vote this way. It's normal. It's a
big
normal
5
stuff.
personality stuff.
Sure.
So the point is you appeal to a certain temperament that I don't appeal to,
Right.
and vice versa. But I think, like, you know, initially a lot of my videos were, I was thinking like, okay, I'm the TA to Jordan Peterson's college lectures. I'll take these very complex topics that a lot of people struggle with, because I kept hearing from people like, I don't really understand what he says, blah, 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 which is like, fair enough. He goes into some rabbit holes.
He's like that.
But I, like, you're like the subjectivity in art, or is objectivity, which one's the shorter one?
Objectivity is a shorter one.
Objectivity in art, where you say you're a light side Jordan Peterson.
I did say
I'm like, okay, well, this guy's clearly an enlightened centrist.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Because I think, like,
okay,
well, we can talk about,
that's an accusation for sure.
We can talk about a compliment. It's all subjective. Well, it's all subjective and pragmatic.
Those are different, pragmatic and subjective, by the way.
That's fair. But it's like, it seems to me that you are, I think a lot of people would categorize you as a left-wing video essayist. I think
I said some of the right words in the video.
Yeah.
I definitely I call myself
the hat,
communist, gender confused.
And the hat gives it away too. But you pay homage to that I guess title, or that category,
like
that people would put
leftist, you mean?
Yeah, leftist, but specifically like left-wing video essayist. But when you,
Sure.
but like,
well, that's it's interesting to think about, right? Because like I'm definitely naturally attracted to leftist ideas. I definitely would have identified myself very solidly as that like a few years ago. Now I just don't identify as anything, because I'm just trying to be helpful. I don't even care. You know what I mean? But like it's funny. But I was gonna say like it's more like I caught that market. You know what I mean? It's like that's how the proper way to identify it, right? Because it's not like a community necessarily, even an ideology. It's just that people that watch leftist video essayists are recommended me by YouTube's algorithm. Like, so it's my business as I'm approximately leftist, which is very funny to think about. That's literally, it's just algorithmic business. Like, that's the pool I'm pulling from. Or I started, at least.
Well, but then that would confirm my suspicion, which is that you are categorically different from someone like Philosophy Tube or ContraPoints. ContraPoints is, I would put her C tier or D tier Enlightened Centrist.
Okay, so
she's on her way up. But like Philosophy Tube is, I would say, more on the postmodern side, and like your objectivity in art video, in my mind, like, is at odds with a lot of the underlying like left-wing ideology in terms of like,
I guess
a lot of it's postmodern
here, because subjectivity in art. I mean, I just remember I was in a hole like creating that when I was creating it. So I would be surprised to hear what you think that has in opposition to whatever you think postmodernism is. There's something else I wanted to say, but I forget. There's something about something you said, but I don't even know what it is.
That's fair. Well, the whole Jordan Peterson. Listen, Jordan Peterson. He's a grumpy old man for sure.
Yeah.
With an anger problem, and probably on some withdrawals. And so when he goes after postmodernism, he's looking at it very one-dimensionally. There is value in postmodernism. Like Deleuze, I haven't read much Deleuze, but like the whole idea of hyperreality, and like we imitate the original piece of art, and then it just further imitates away until we're in some abstracted realm that's gone, which I think was part of your critically analyzing memes video you mentioned, where it was like the meme has become, it's a meme of a meme to the point where it's like a bunch of heads on a snake, and then it's like, it's so divorced from the original meme that the distance from the meme is the meme itself. Anyway, there is value in postmodern ways of thinking, and a lot of people accuse Peterson of being postmodern because he's kind of on that pragmatist side of things.
They like that contradiction. They're entertained by it.
Yeah,
but also that Jordan, by the way, for people watching that are fans of me and stuff like this, like the part of the joy of this, the fun, like, and this is part of the joke, right? Like, I like to think of everything that I do basically as like a joke when it comes to art. I think as Phoebe Bridgers mentioned some article that a friend told Phoebe Bridgers, so the advice is uncredited, but it's like your best lyrics are jokes. And I think that's pretty true. So I try to structure a lot of my art as jokes, even if it appears 100% serious. It's mostly a joke. Like, so like, like my Folgers video I just did, I crushed it out in like a week or whatever. I just had this stroke of inspiration. I was like, I need a Christmas video. Folgers coffee would be funny. And then I thought, but this is the joke of it, right? Is that I thought that the funniest, probably the funniest possible thing to do with the Folgers Christmas meme, which we know about, right, is to make anyone watch it really sad by the end.
Yeah.
That would be very funny to me, right? But then it's only transcendently funny in the manner that I desire it to be if I 100% do it. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't reveal that I think that's a joke, if like we actually induce genuine sadness and existentialism in your heart by the end of the Folgers incest meme. So that was the goal. Why am I saying that? I don't know why I'm saying that.
Because it's very postmodern.
No, I don't know. I guess maybe with the meme thing too. Whatever, commitment.
Well, what I was saying is like,
it's what Jordan Peterson. Sorry, is that like part of the immediate thing with Jordan? And you say this in your videos, so because this thing, it's like I was looking for Jordan Peterson fans, and this is one of the reasons I got so wrapped up in this. Right, is because I found that the Jordan Peterson fans also haven't read Maps of Meaning. Paul, you haven't read Maps of Meaning.
Whoa, that's an accusation.
Is it true?
I listened to the first 10 hours of the audiobook. That's
pretty impressive. Hours. How many hours are 30?
There are 30 hours in the audiobook. I have watched all the lectures.
Yes. Did you watch like multiple years or just one? Which one?
The only ones I've watched back to back are the one where the camera pans.
2017.
Yeah, maybe the personality one and the
personality course also. Okay. So you watch 2 of his courses. Yeah. Sorry. So part of the joke that I'm saying here is with the Jordan Peterson thing is a lot of people often go like, and by the way, it's fair that you haven't read Maps of Meaning. It's very dense and you bounce off of it. It's like Campbell's The Hero's Journey. It's like it's hard to read.
Yeah, I tried reading
It's designed for but it's designed for academic context, right? So, so I understand. But also that's the thing is like people often will criticize Jordan Peterson. I would say understandably so, right? Like what they have to do is they have to take a few of his videos and basically react to them, right? That's people's format for a YouTube thing on Jordan Peterson is they react to a few footage, right? And it makes sense because he has been launching himself into cyberspace nonstop without shutting the fuck up since like 1998. It's crazy, right? He's so I understand why people have to narrow their scope of what to engage with, but it results in partially this issue where like, you know, you criticize Jordan Peterson because he said this, and then someone like you can come in and be like, well, elsewhere, he said this. And so I thought that it would be and then also I noticed I felt like strong supporters and detractors of him, neither of them have engaged with the work, like philosophically, like given this a full time a day, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? So anyway, so the joke for me for the Jordan Peterson thing was, what if I knew everything? So no one on the planet could accuse me of not having done the work. And I have done the work. And then of course you transmogrify that by also incorporating research into other areas that you're interested in and give the thing a larger point. So I'm not just a massive fan of Jordan Peterson, but I currently am at the state of saturation. I'm probably like the 0.05% like percentile of people like with, you know, close to encyclopedic knowledge of everything Jordan ever said. So for example, in his 2019 Oxford University appearance, he clearly has watched the ContraPoints video. And I think that's funny because he talked about the postmodernism thing in of itself, because he talks about the postmodern neo-Marxism. He's like, and you know, people criticize me because I can't do his voice, I'm sorry. But they're like, people criticize me because they say those are contradictions, because one's like postmodernism is critical of grand narratives and Marxism is a grand narrative. Which, anyways, it's just ContraPoints' point. It just makes me laugh to think about. Like, he watched the video and was like, "Wow. Yo, I lost your sound. Is it just me?" Is it me? That's all I care.
Hello.
And you're back.
There we go.
We're back.
I was cursing at you for that. No.
For what?
For criticizing Jordan Peterson. No. Well, okay, so on the postmodern thing.
Yes.
Because I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yes.
He seems so pissed at the Foucault jihadis in terms of taking Foucault's claim to the most religious extreme level of everything is power. Literally all art, all discourse, all social systems. Everything is power. And that, I agree, is toxic and backwards and not true. And the objectivity in art video or whatever, or, you know, a lot of what you talk about is like, it's getting in touch with our cultural roots. It's recognizing the archetypes. It's recognizing the universal kind of human mimetic convergences, right? The archetypes are the points of convergent mimetic evolution or whatever. And like that's directly at odds with the postmodern stuff. And so you at least my reading of you is, and your philosophy is, you also share that utter rejection of the idea that all knowledge and all art is fundamentally power-based. Would you agree, or you think I need to watch more on CJ The X?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think that like my whole life, like we can pare this way back down because we don't have to talk about ideas for this at all. Literally just my life is how I started doing my stuff, right? So my experience is that I am an artist. I care a lot about art. I've kind of been ideating, I would say, in the fashion that currently is my job, about like art since like I was about like 17, I think, is like when I started to have a lot of these thoughts and basically like start to work on like heuristics, like amateurish philosophy, essentially, that was just motivated towards me trying to get my point across to people. And the feeling that I had was I was very frustrated as an artist that the people around me were very comfortable saying art is subjective. This was so common.
Yes.
And it's not young people, it's everyone, right? It's like that's a very common refrain. It's like art is relegated to the subjective realm, and then like whatever
math and science is objective.
Yeah.
Right.
So that always bothered me because I felt deep down it wasn't true and wasn't even like helpful. So that's just always been my project. And as soon as I started making like YouTube videos, that was just me saying shit I've been thinking this whole time and kind of preaching in my locale, right? And so, you know, I was just, so my objectivity in art video was literally just like, you know, there's this subject, art is subjective is what everyone kind of believes, right? And there's obviously a strong case to be made. And then the online specifically, there was a trend of people doing like the, I don't know, Victorian like aesthetic, I don't even know what thing, where they're like, no, art is objective according to my standards.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Which is entertainingly stupid in its own right. So I just wanted to make a case for objectivity in the manner that I'd already been thinking. So this is what's kind of curious about my philosophical and YouTube career. My job is only, that was my intuition. It was just that art is more objective than you think. And
which is true. I agree with that.
Well, I can argue it pretty robustly. I don't know how you would argue it. I saw a clip where you were mentioning my name to somebody in an argument about.
Oh, that's right. About objectivity in music.
But I thought you did a bad job. So.
Well, that's fair.
I don't think.
I guess
it's fair. I think it's okay. You can like pre-intellectually have a feeling towards something being true without like being able to explicitly articulate. That's dandy. But this is what's strange is it's landed me in this philosophical area where like, you know, now I'm like in Maps of Meaning and all Jordan Peterson's work. And I understand that maybe you could take my idea of like objectivity in art as being analogous to like cultural exploration, like stretching out across like chaos or whatever, putting your borders down. Like I'm seeing where this takes me philosophically, but it's been strange. In addition to the fact that I've also had an influx of fan base of people that are like from STEM fields that are attracted to what I'm saying because their sense of science is more subjective than you think. And apparently that's the same thing. I didn't even think about that, but that's where I am now. You know what I mean? Anyway, sorry. Yeah, I'm excited to talk.
Okay, okay. So like on the objectivity in music.
Yes.
I guess it's like, which one would I get on here?
Yeah.
Like humans are.
You're a musician. I know you're a musician. You insert.
Yeah, not a very good one. But okay. Going back to the personal stuff, I have also had these arguments with musician friends who say, white noise is not objectively any more music than Beethoven's Fifth or Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge, or insert your favorite song here.
Okay.
Obviously,
you really reveal your whiteness just in that moment.
I know, that's fine. Obviously, people can differ in what their highest, like their favorite song is, right, and style. But if you look across everyone's favorite music, even for as much variation as there is between whatever, I don't know, Kendrick Lamar and Red Hot Chili Peppers, and then some like, you know, Eastern music that I'm not even aware of or whatever, for as much variation as there is there, compared to the set of all noises, including white noise and just, you know, screaming and cacophony and random notes being played, there's a lot of structure that emerges from those good songs that by people's own standards and own subjective standard is their favorite song, which indicates there's something objective. There's some pattern that those songs are converging on, even if they do it differently, that is completely different from just like white noise. Because I would ask my friends, like, you spend how much of your time making this music, pouring your soul into it, and you're going to tell me that static noise on the radio is like, well, that's fundamentally, it's the same. It's just the fact that you know, human power structures determined that some music was better than others. It's like,
well, that's
no,
strange.
it's
Well,
much
that's
deeper than
precisely
that.
the issue that I have with artists, right? Is nobody behaves or feels like art is subjective.
Right.
Like no one. But they are comfortable kind of just like parroting that because it appears true. And anyways, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I'm reading, actually, something I'm reading right now just separately is I'm trying to get, if anyone knows Cuck philosophy, give me his contact info. I'm trying to, I've been emailing this cunt, trying to talk to him. Sorry, I don't mean to call him a cunt, but I mean, like, I want to speak to him because I think he does really good work. But I bought his book, How to Philosophize with a Hammer and Sickle, and it's about like, it's about Marx and Nietzsche, and it's really good, right? Like, here's an example. Like, there's not a lot of, I'm finding like strong like philosophy channels on the internet that are like kind of pouring a lot of resources into doing some strong philosophical study and are able to present it in a way that's like, engaging. So anyways, I'm enjoying his book. Literally, this is just a comparison, kind of contrast synthesis thing that he's doing with Marx and Nietzsche. Anyways, so his own, I just like one of the ideas he was articulating as something that they seem to have in common, which is that like, philosophy, like what is philosophy, right? And that a lot of people kind of tacitly think, especially in academia, but also in like life, that philosophy as well, like pursuit of knowledge should be like dispassionate and like disinterested. Like it should be some sort of like cold, calculating, analytic, arriving at the facts of the ultimate truth of things, right? That like philosophizing should be in pursuit of truth, like at the reduction of emotion, let's say. And so what Nietzsche was very, very against, and Marx is also against, and also William James is very against, is that the idea that like we philosophize just to identify like facts. I don't think that's true.
Right.
I think it's really
that's nerd shit.
Philosophize in pursuit of a specific goal, right? So I think it's interesting that like why wouldn't you? I don't know, that it just seems like meaningful enough to me. So it seems to me significant, useful, valuable, no less valid for me to philosophize actively to prove a point that I believe without necessarily like justification. Not in the least like not for the least reason that like I believe that if I am capable of proving that justification, then I can actually shape reality backwards, which is true. This is something that's articulated nicely in Maps of Meaning, actually. This
is Jordan Peterson's point about science being a religious enterprise. It's like there's no such thing as just going out and identifying individual facts, because how do you know there's an infinite number of facts? So what is the motivation that puts you in the right direction to know which facts to pursue? It's like it's the religious faith, it's the faith idea that encountering the facts brings about good in the archetypal or metaphysical sense or whatever.
Yeah. So the point being that this is a very William James thing too, because this is the will to believe, is like an underlying like belief that if I uncover these, well, okay, so it's a lot of things. Sorry. It's funny because I would come at this. A lot of these things are like, yeah, sure. I'm start in this kind of leftist soil, and then I'm just doing the work and I'm trying to be useful. And so it's interesting to watch like how many different angles at which you can come from, which you can come something. Wow, insane. Language is preposterous.
We'll clip that up and repair it, but yeah, go
ahead. I would put it like, I think AI is probably a really like a wonderful like analog for this. And this is like a leftist critique of AI. Abebe Barhane is like a cognitive like researcher that has a lot of critiques of AI that I've interviewed. And like there's this kind of illusion of like that AI is like there's a mythology around AI, right? That it's like this intelligence growing, and it's like this fact, it's like this cold hard mechanistic fact that like we can't get away from, and it's growing, and like how can we argue with this thing? And I don't think this is true at all. And I also think the only thing it serves is like capitalistic profiteering off
I agree,
excited imaginations, because there's so many things you're covering up with that narrative, right? And the whole critique of AI would be that like these machines don't do shit without human input and without us pointing them in a direction, right?
Yep.
And if you pretend, like, not to mention, I think Philosophy Tube actually did a wonderful job also of talking about this, like the farms and farms of people employed right now to upkeep like ChatGPT and stuff, to like keep them working, right? Not to mention the wealth of human like accomplishment and productivity that it has to like eat as data and then spit back out in a fucking slurry. And then we're spending tons of human hours coaching it on which slurries are good things or which ones are bad and stuff. That's how this thing is happening, right? And we get to pretend none of that is happening and human value isn't involved even a little bit if we act like there's a scary AI overlord. So anyways, this is supposed to be an articulation of like some of the faith that's embedded within science. We don't just invent whatever, and we don't just record whatever, and we don't just investigate whatever. Before, like the first step of the like scientific method is you have to guess. It's a hypothesis. It's just I call it the mystic wall. You know what I mean? It's like the philosophies end up at this point at some point where you go like, and I'm like,
you make an observation and then you come up with a hypothesis. Where does the hypothesis come from?
Where does it come from?
Purely
Robert
intuitive.
Pirsig wrote about this nicely. If you've read, have you read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance? You gotta. Everyone's gotta. That's my second video this year.
Well, you know what? Jordan Peterson recommended it first, but now that you've reaffirmed it, now I think
it is on Jordan Peterson's reading list, which I didn't know. I was Zen and the
Art. I thought you were the one who's in the top 0.5% of knowing all the not even Jordan Peterson's.
No, excuse me. I apologize. I'm not surprised in this moment. I didn't know when I was getting into Zen of the Art of Motorcycle that it would appear on Peterson's recommendation list, which of course I am well aware of his reading list.
I withdraw my accusation.
But no, Robert Pirsig was it's another video that I'm making. There's a whole thing. I went to Bozeman, Montana. I flew down there with a couple friends to research in the Montana State University archives of this shit. And like, and I'm in contact with the Robert Pirsig Association and so that's the next video I'm going to do is a big video on his concept of quality.
Yeah.
That was before I got to, but interesting enough, there's these threads, right? Learning about philosophy is like learning about jazz musicians, right? It's like Bill Evans played on Kind of Blue, and then you check out a Bill Evans album, and then you learn about like his bass player and stuff. Anyways, when Robert Pirsig did his thing on quality, in his sequel, he articulates specifically he was compared to William James in pragmatism, right? It's really adorable how these threads pull together because it's very interesting. I had someone, and then just recently, someone from my community was messaging me. They just realized that like William James is quoted by W.E.B. Du Bois. I don't know how to say his name, unfortunately. But that William James and pragmatism is actually linked to the Black civil rights struggle in America, which I know. But that's so funny. Like watching I don't know, you can kind of see this thing shape up.
Cornel West is like his main thing is the genealogy of pragmatism. He goes through the whole thing and he says it's starting with Emerson.
Yes,
which I was not even aware that was the origin, according to.
It's complicated. Well, now I've read 2 full textbooks on pragmatism, including The Metaphysical Club by Louis Menand, which you might know because Peterson recommends it. He recommended me, so I read it. And then Cheryl Mezak did good stuff on it. But the genealogy is interesting. Cornel West, he also calls it prophetic pragmatism. I think that's pretty interesting too. Like he has his religious take on it. But no, but this mosaic of, but this is exactly goes back to the objectivity and art thing, right?
Right. I was gonna say all this to say music is objective, and everyone who says that art is purely subjective is fucking wrong.
What there is culture and there's threads. If you care to kind of manifest an idea or to pursue a goal, right? People have tried to do the same thing before you, and you should link up with them in this mimetic soup. You should take on the glory of your ancestors' accomplishments. What's the point, right? At least there, if you dig, there is language to articulate and pursue what you already have pursued. If there isn't, there's probably something closely related, and you can build on that, which gains you repute and is fun. Now I'm a pragmatist. I'm in conversation with the pragmatist. Now it's a thing. You know what I mean? It definitely beats this everything is subjective thing, because what's that for? It's just defeatist and contradictory to your actual actions and the enlightened beliefs.
Amen. And that is why S tier Enlightened Centrist going after the fundamental postmodern neo-Marxist rot that's infecting our university, right?
All right, that's fun.
CJ The X agrees 100%.
Sure. Do I?
Well, let's talk about that. Do you think? Well, CJ, you and I are aware of certain individuals who have said that Jordan Peterson, quote, is a weepy-eyed fascist. How do you feel about that?
Are you referring to a specific person?
I'm referring to a specific person who,
was it FD?
In all likelihood, will watch this. I think so. Yeah, it is FD. Yeah,
that's wonderful.
Weepy-eyed fascist is what he said.
Yeah. I think so what I would say about people that throw around words like fascist and like racist and stuff like that is I understand like their methodology. I actually honestly, I mean, you're talking to me, so yeah. But I actually have found it like revelatory and useful. I found it like Christian in ways. So the point being that, like, what is critical race theory? What is the idea of systemic racism or rape culture? Like, what I perceive these ideas to be predicated on is this like removal of responsibility of the individual. Is we're not trying to war with individuals. We don't care if your intent and your essential platonic objective nature is racist or fascist. That's really not very important. I take it as a pragmatist principle. What we want to see less of is what we can maybe call fascism. What we want to see less of is what we want to call white supremacy. Like, there's a pattern, and we're not holding you personally accountable for, you know, being subject to the pattern, but we do want to solve the pattern, and we're not very interested in that circumstance, in your intent or your essential nature. Like, who cares, right? Like, we care about value, right? So I'm saying I can empathize with this like strain of logic, because this is what I liked about these sorts of like analyses of culture, of politics, or whatever, right? I'm going off them a little bit because I'm not sure, like, I would like that's what I think. That's what I think when I hear these things. I'm finding that people aren't necessarily acting those things out very consistently, and that some people are treating, I call it postmodern neo-Cartesianism. That's my invention.
That's right.
Is people are now like taking what I find to be these pragmatic tools to try to move culture forward, and they're treating them like they're Cartesian identifiers, and like that we are just kind of.
What do you mean Cartesian identifiers?
Sorry, so by Cartesian I mean like the Descartes was the guy as I think therefore I am. So this is hard rationalism to the expense of emotion and even experience to some major degree.
Sure.
Is what can we know rationally, like in and of itself, like as a fact, by pure logic.
Propositions, right? Essentially,
what?
Propositional logic.
Huh?
Like pure propositional logic, right? I think
yes,
therefore
okay,
I am. What can I build on top of that?
Yeah, like that Kantian a priori dance. Yeah, like pure like math. Like, it's got to be math. Like math is like pure a priori knowledge in some sense. It's like it's true because it's true because it's true before you even insert experience. To be clear, this is stupid, and I don't respect it. I think
Agreed.
It's
phenomenology, based phenomenology.
Based phenomenology. That's the reason it's so popular, right? And so anyways, why was I saying that? Right. So that's what I mean by Cartesianism is I'm finding that people are using postmodern or pragmatist concepts, but they're applying like a Cartesian normative value to it. Like, it's like I'm finding that people, I don't know. Yeah. So what do I think about calling Jordan like a weepy-eyed fascist? I would say I understand what you mean. Like, I understand the point, and I understand like the logic underpinning it.
Sure.
So where I'm at just personally is I just don't know if I see the pragmatic value of calling him that necessarily. But Jordan, you got to also think about the case, right? Like, Jordan's a really hard fucking like horse to wrangle. Like, I'm the best YouTuber that's ever lived, and I'm just getting to the end of it. Like, after a year I'm figuring out how to talk about this because it's endless. You know what I mean? And he said so much, and it's hard to pin down.
And a lot of it's on Twitter, and a lot of it is fascistic in its spirit and essence, let's say.
Well, it's spirit
in just that it's
word for you to use. I would love to talk about the spirit.
Yeah. Well, the bullshit he spews constantly and just literally feeding into his like most angry impulses. It's like this is what a fascist would do, right? It would absolve themselves of the responsibility of actually, thinking about what they tweet before they tweet it. But the whole point of Peterson going after the postmodern neo-Marxists.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me.
I think there's validity to that. I think postmodern neo-Marxism is a useful term.
Okay, so why do you think it's useful? Because to be clear, people also, so Paul is aware that I'm just a pragmatist. That's been my area of research for the past year. And pragmatism is quite fundamentally like predicated on the idea that your ideas and the validity of things and the truth of things is validated by their utility, like by their usefulness in accomplishing a goal, right? So you're being very astute by being like, I think it's a useful term, because I'm like, well, that's the question, isn't it? Not is it true, but like, is it useful? So go on. Why do you think it's useful? I'm curious.
So it's like all tools, it has a cost and a benefit. So if we agree there is such a thing as going too far left, which I believe there is, there's definitely something that's going too far right, hence the glory of the Taoist Aristotelian Enlightened Centrism. Then we need a term to describe it. We need to put words to these, what it's like to go too far left. Right. The common parlance is woke. Now that's very, very, very broad, and people can't define it. There's that one clip of, I think it's Bethany Mandel, who they're like, can you define woke?
Yeah.
And she's like, this is going to get clipped because she couldn't do it or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, I am sympathetic to people having a very broad term, sort of like racist or whatever. It's like, or fascist or far right. Like, obviously, a broad term has utility.
Yeah.
The postmodern neo-Marxist term is the opposite spectrum of that, where it has hyper focus, but it gets lost because it has its own costs, because it's too specific.
Yeah.
It lends itself to being easily deconstructed by people who use terms like postmodernism and neo-Marxism in a very specific context. Like, for example, postmodernism, skepticism of grand narratives and meta narratives. Marxism, a meta narrative. Right.
It's a definition game. Yeah.
And now my contention is that it's because postmodernism, in that it is skeptical of meta narratives, including the idea of objective truth, it's a performative contradiction. That is not a real, it's just a made up language games. It has no bearing or usefulness. Like Deleuzian philosophy, to the very limited degree that I understand it, talking about hyper reality. Okay, that has utility. And so it's not saying that there's no such thing as objective truth, or at least I can pluck that from Deleuzian postmodern philosophy without saying there's no such thing as objective truth. But when it comes to like postmodern neo-Marxism, it's like, well, like intersectionality and critical race theory are like the classic postmodern neo-Marxist
that's very
frameworks.
I don't know, because that gets so sloppy. I don't know if so obviously I might be critical of postmodern neo-Marxism as a concept. The weirdest thing, I'll just be vulnerable.
Oh, please.
I don't even care anymore. But like, I'm almost even like warming up to the term woke, despite my disgust with it. When utilized,
you're not the only one.
No, hold up. Let me finish.
Go ahead.
When utilized in good humor, right? As a very approximate, like, orienting reflex, right? Not as actually like it's a problem. I think that's maybe silly, but I think that pragmatically,
it's a problem.
Fair enough. I think that pragmatically it might even be useful. I think it's actually more useful even sometimes to be like, so we're talking, right? So something I've been saying to people recently is that my new thoughts about politics are maybe that it's more useful to maybe say two things about your politics, right? Instead of what you are, which is, again, it's a postmodern neo-Cartesianism as far as I'm concerned. You're identifying something like platonically, your essence. Seems strange, right? I don't want to enlist in anything. Like, I'm just trying to help, right? That should be the highest orienting principle. Right. So in terms, but what is maybe useful, right, for, let's say, us to have a conversation, because you're a person, you've been very kind to me on your channel. You've complimented me greatly, and that's very nice. I think you're also
really pragmatic. I've got you here now.
It's certainly, yeah. The teleology of your behavior with regards to your appreciation of me has landed you in a situation where you get to speak to somebody you admire, I guess. Sorry for putting words in your mouth, but it's fine. Okay. Everyone admires me. It's okay, Paul. But sorry. The pragmatically,
two things about your politics, not how you define yourself, but also
that you shouldn't identify yourself in this objective sense. But I would say these two things are like, you should just admit what your political intuitions are. Just intuitions, not convictions. Just intuition.
Like, I'm progressive or I'm conservative, or what do you mean intuitions?
Sure, yeah, your intuitions. What are your intuitions? I'm telling you, my intuitions are progressive, right? And I see like a thing going down, and like the lefties, the progressive, generally, whatever that is, generally I'm sympathetic to their case. So I'm like, that seems probably right. And then the other thing seems probably bad to be, right? That's how I feel, right? Maybe your intuitions are conservative, right? So that's one piece of information that we can establish without actually locking ourselves down to some objective explanation. And then the second thing is, which side of the culture war were you on in 2016? Yeah. Remember that? I was there. I was on the left side is where I was.
I was Platinum 2 in League of Legends at the time. I didn't concern myself with the trappings of the culture war. It was only till later. It was only till I got bored of League of Legends that I need a new online MOBA to get addicted to. The MOBA of online politics.
This is the thing that this is what I think, and I'll get to this later, but art is the answer here. Like, quality is the answer. Like, I don't know, centrism might not be the thing. I don't know, that's not what I care about, but quality triumphs over all.
Enlightened centrism.
And so
now we're talking quality.
The enlightened indicates the quality, I imagine.
Right.
But I like that you're funny, and actually, you know what I mean? We could never really shoe on head down from the sky, because she makes us a laugh, you know? So, you know, you can't beat quality. Quality's not arguable. I think it's pretty interesting.
Agreed. Well, and back to the postmodern neo-Marxist point. I
Yes.
brought that up in the League video. It was spawning a. Hold on. Have you played League of Legends ever?
No, never.
Are you vaguely familiar with like?
No, I have a friend
okay.
that I love that plays League, but I don't know.
Okay, well, that's good that the League stuff landed with you as someone who has never played it before. That gives me more encouragement.
I mean, it
works.
Yeah. I told you, right? We've only been in like a mild amount of contact, but I told you, like, just because I'm interested in quality and I like businesses that work and are of quality. I was like, the League formula is great. That's gonna work if you just keep cranking those out.
Yeah,
I mean, now you've proven you can do it. You've done it like 4 times now. It's very funny. It works very well. Hard to kill.
I will ride the League of Legends horse, the Hecarim, for those who play.
So okay, listen,
back to postmodern neo-Marxism.
Postmodern neo-Marxism. So
and the utility of it.
Well,
the utility of that term. And I said intersectionality and critical race theory are the classic examples of what I would call postmodern neo-Marxism.
I think that's difficult just because I see a more optimistic interpretation of what intersectionality and critical race theory are. I kind of respect those as intellectual traditions.
Sure.
As you say, every tool, like in order to be something, you have to not be other things. So like critical race theory and intersectionality are they're philosophies or whatever you want to call them, right? The methodologies, and they don't work for everything. They work for something though, right? So
yeah, but they claim that's sort of one of the my problem with them is that like critical race theory claims that all social structures are predicated on power dynamics, and the fundamental power dynamic is race, because that's the original.
Okay, so this
starting with neocolonialism. Neocolonialism is the fundamental sin.
Okay.
And then all social structures, even like the nuclear family, is a socially constructed Eurocentric concept that reinforces like the nuclear family, which then serves capital or all these different things or whatever.
Okay.
I
just think what you just described is a very complicated mess of abstractions. I think all of what you could take issue with all sorts of them. That I'm saying for myself, I've been around in 2016, I was on the left side of the Côte d'Ivoire. So I was hanging out with these people, and I'm like, if you want to try to place yourself on a spectrum, like maybe I'm the kind of like conservative, pragmatic person within the leftist camp, and that like I'll hear people ideating really hard, and I'll be concerned about, well, wait, what's going to work? Like I agree with you morally, and yet what's going to work? So anyways, so what I'm saying is I've always managed to, because that's where I'm from, see the sides of people that are perfectly willing to engage in more nuanced narratives.
Sure.
They exist, right? So then I'm saying I'm okay with these tools. So this is my criticism of the postmodern neo-Marxism concept, right? As far as I can tell, and this is probably the most profound credit that should like redound to Peterson's name, is he probably invented postmodern neo-Marxism, and he did it in 2017. And he did it as a result of 2 sources, because I've looked into it. Stephen Hicks is explaining postmodernism. You're correct about that. And the other side of course, is in Maps of Meaning, his personal research into like totalitarian states throughout the 20th century, particularly through a kind of Nietzschean death of God lens, right? So basically, this was concocted as a result of his research into the Russian gulags and the kind of like I don't even know what to call it, because I don't know if this is the part where I think it's maybe too far to start to diagnose in this fashion, but like sociological broad scale pathologies, right? Predicated on such mythic deep issues like lying. Like it's so big that it's almost blasphemy, I think, to assign it to actual objects that we experience and have to talk about now, right? So it's like the social, spiritual pathology of like Russian culture that ended in the Soviet Russian gulags, mixed with he read Explaining Postmodernism by Stephen Hicks. And then Jordan Peterson preached about this like fucking 20 times for like an hour about this new theory of his, postmodern neo-Marxism.
Good thing.
And I don't know it was a good thing. I think it was a terrible thing, actually, because I think it really, it's this like concocted explanation of the narrative of history of the last 100 years. Makes it like a spiritual problem, a linear problem, an easily explicable problem with 2 sources, neither of which, by the way, are any postmodern philosophers or any Marxist philosophers. So what we're talking about now is like just an idea, and he preaches it like it's fact, and it gives people this like profound ammunition, because you ask people to define woke. Did you see Ben Shapiro and Destiny's Debate? You must have.
I did.
Yeah,
the most recent one.
So then Ben Shapiro on Lex Friedman's podcast, we all tuned in, and Ben Shapiro defined woke, right? And he defined it the way Jordan Peterson taught everyone to define it in 2017. It's predicated that there's no reality higher than power. And life is essentially a power struggle between different identity groups. No one says this. Okay, listen, I understand you can criticize it as having these kind of predicates built into the, like, that the belief is kind of inlaid into the philosophy. But like, no one says there is nothing except for power. I mean, go on. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's people that say that. And then I would say they're incorrect, or they're being limited or foolish in their articulation of their philosophy, because their philosophy is better than that.
There's a Philosophy Tube video where she says, what did she say? She says,
we're going to talk about Philosophy Tube right now.
Well, hold on. I'm just,
motherfuckers. I read this. Sorry, I just have these books here, but this is Myth and Mayhem. This is written by 4 different leftist philosophers. Slavoj Žižek wrote the intro. And in that, one of the guys, they're critiquing Jordan Peterson. It's supposed to be the academic critique of Jordan Peterson. And at one of them, they just cite the ContraPoints video. The like 10-minute ContraPoints.
Which is valid.
No, it's not. What the
I think it's valid. Listen, as a pragmatist, I think it's valid.
Books. No one reads books.
Oh man, the ultra conservative CJ the X doesn't believe that's valid. Hold on.
Go on. Tell me the Philosophy Tube video. Let's do philosophy. Let's talk about Abigail Thorne.
No offense.
Just with love. Just like people cited me.
I believe it's in her critique of Jordan Peterson, where she's got like the white feathers or whatever it is. She says, like, there's people, there's postmodern philosophers who question the idea of objective truth. And she goes, and to be fair, there are some postmodern people that do that. Yes. So even she acknowledges that is a real academic.
Well, of course, people have posited the idea that like everything is kind of intersubjective.
Yeah, and that's the problem.
Agreement, right?
So let me just to align.
I think that's foolish. Okay, sorry.
Well, it's like libertarianism. Yeah. Am I against the idea that the government should generally stay out of my life and, not tax me that much? Like, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm sympathetic to libertarianism.
Yeah.
But if you take the non-aggression principle, which is like the libertarian axiom, you can never, do anything to anyone without their consent, even if it means like educating a child or, extracting taxes or whatever. It's like, well, now you've taken this rule of thumb, libertarianism.
Okay.
And then you've become a religious extremist about it, an anarcho-capitalist. And my concern with the postmodernists, again, I believe, like Deleuze, to the degree that I understand the few points that Deleuze has made, there's value there. It's the people who take the claim that all knowledge is ultimately socially constructed, and what we say is objectively true is a function of who has power. That's exactly what Robin DiAngelo says. Kimberly Crenshaw, who wrote the intersectionality paper that coined the term intersectionality,
I don't know about
says specifically she views intersectionality as a fusing of postmodernism and contemporary politics, which is like right there. So the postmodern aspect is there, and then all of the whole intersectional idea is that we all have identities along dimensions of power, right? The classic Marxist one is just bourgeoisie and proletariat, right? Okay,
so this is where it gets problematic, as you get to the technical area, right? And so
we love the technicals. This is why I brought you here. Only the technicals.
So you know what postmodernism is? Like fundamentally, it was like coined by Lyotard, commissioned by the Quebecois government to write some treatise about the state of philosophy today. So already, postmodernism is like the word bread tube. It's like a way you describe a kind of style of people, right?
Totally. It's like the word liberal. Like liberal means to the right,
fair enough. There's more actual
to the left to a conservative.
Philosophy. Like no postmodernist calls themselves postmodern is the thing, right? So that gets weirder, right? Because you're not even talking about a term. You're talking about a kind of style of person or an era, even a temporal era of person. Because
and a true pragmatist would not refer to themselves as pragmatists either as soon as it became no longer pragmatic to do so.
Which is precisely what Professor Scott Aiken from Vanderbilt University told me, is he doesn't call himself a pragmatist, literally because he's like, people are kind of dirty with the term. I have decided that I want to call myself a pragmatist because I decided that I want to reincorporate pragmatism into culture. So I'm going to make that effort. But that's an argument, right? It's an argument. You ever see Dave Chappelle talk with, was it Maya Angelou, about like whether or not they should be using the N-word, like reclaiming it?
No.
Well, that's a fantastic video. That was after his
added to the watch list.
Yeah, you'd like it, I think, because you cite Dave Chappelle as one of your centrist.
Oh yeah, Chappelle and Bo Burnham are
bizarre, but okay. I had a video about him. I want to make one day, but
Angela. Okay, well, the reason that I bring it up, hold on, add to watch later.
Go on. Yes.
Where's my add to watch later?
It's okay.
Watch later.
You could talk to me. I'll send you it later.
Thank you.
I love you.
Is because I it's like it's like the critique of Peterson as a fascist, or a weepy-eyed fascist, as certain PF Young orbiters like to comment.
Yeah, similar, like 2 capital letter, like afterglow people.
I don't know what that means.
FD signifier, PF Young. That was it.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I see. Yes. Oh, I didn't even recognize that. Look at that. What an intersection of
I technically
linguistic aesthetics.
CJ.
That's true. Oh my God. Revelations in real time.
Yeah, we should read some Derrida together.
I should read some Derrida, because guess how much Derrida I've actually read?
0, like Peterson.
That's fair. Well,
by the way, you know,
which is all to the point of,
okay,
does the term have utility? If there are people who say, for example, the nuclear family is a white supremacist structure, then whatever terminology allows us to identify that as ridiculous and harmful and problematic in any number of ways,
okay,
is beneficial in my opinion.
Well,
now,
I'm curious as to what you're
person...
talking about. Are you what immediately? There's so many like implications there in that we're not talking, which surprises me. I'm so curious about the value of all the things talking about. So I think you might agree that like a mommy and a daddy and a boy and a girl, like isolated in a city without like a broader community kind of participate in the enculturation of the kids, is probably bad. You want people to have a community they work with.
Oh yeah, that's Jordan Peterson's central claim.
Is that Jordan Peterson's central claim?
I should say his central critique of Jung, who is Carl Jung was over like, it's all in your head. It's all in your head. If you just get your anima and animus straightened out, you'll be fine.
True. That's
and
true.
Peterson's like, no. Your sanity depends on the stability of your social
smart
structure.
About Jordan Peterson, and then this is an agreement point between Jordan and Foucault, which is very entertaining. Which is that like Madness and Civilization, I presume it to be of the same structure. I haven't read Madness and Civilization. What I'm saying though is I haven't found a single scrap of evidence that Peterson has read any postmodern philosophy, except for he has read Madness and Civilization. He mentioned that, I think, on his second Joe Rogan appearance. But in it, he says, and he also says it in his Maps of Meaning lectures, the 2015 ones, I believe, where he says he read it and he found it so obvious that it was pathetic. Like this was so true that it was embarrassing. People cited this as relevant. The point being, and I like this about Jordan Peterson, by the way, this is his only actual analysis of postmodern philosophy, as we know now, but his the point of the thing that he echoes a lot that I think is quite smart, and you've put in your videos, and I think that's smart because people treat him like he's some sort of individualist and you can just figure it out in your own mind if you just take care of business, society doesn't matter, which is not what he says even a little bit, which is madness can kind of incur like as a result of your mismatch with society, like your sanity and your being depends on your like interpersonal structure.
Yes.
And I like that. I like that about he almost gets there. He's changed an emphasis. You know, I think Deleuze is the one that said like a lot of our philosophy, the future philosophy, should be done in terms of what is remarkable and interesting, as opposed to what is true, essentially. And so a lot of philosophy is like, how much emphasis do people place on these points? And I think he's increased in his emphasis on like individuality and capitalism. No, the opposite.
Oh, really?
Well, I think that his he doesn't emphasize it. Well, I don't know. That's weird to say. Enough is a weird thing to say, I guess. So I'm gonna not like.
That's fair. Well, like in the biblical series where he's around the table, the Daily Wire produced one.
The Daily Wire one.
Yeah. He specific
that.
They can get boring.
Isn't it?
There's too many people at the table.
It's the sequel. Listen, I'm talking from an artistic critique. It's the sequel to his event where he did a bunch of lectures. Like this is like I don't know if it's my favorite thing he's ever done like at all, but like it's the peak like formal crystallization of his shit, right? It's like I'm gonna take my Maps of Meaning lectures, my psychology lectures, I'm putting them on a world stage, I'm gonna sell out stadiums, and I'm just gonna talk about the fucking Bible, like first few chapters. It's epic, right? Because it's beautiful utilization of his skills he's been building since the 90s and whatever, right? And it's epic. And then the sequel to it, I'm just saying artistically is disappointing that it's literally just him hanging out with like Dennis Prager, who like I looked into it, is just a conservative man. Like there's no expertise around the table. There's some, I guess, but it sucks. I don't like it.
I agree. It's too boring because I want to hear him get into flow state and start weaving together this narrative and all this stuff.
That's his whole thing. Whether you like it or not is its own shit.
Now there is some interesting stuff because he's in contention with like fundamentalists, like they are biblical, literalists to some degree, and Dennis Prager is Jewish and whatnot. So they have like interfaith discussion, which is interesting. But going back to the original point of bringing that up, I believe in the first or second one, he specifically says, Peterson says, I've fallen prejudiced to the idea that like we should focus on the individual fundamentally,
Right.
precisely because
Exit is the very like kind of like group oriented narrative. That makes sense to me too.
Sure. Well, and just the notion that your sanity is dependent on positive relationships, and relationships mean other people, and those relationships exist in a society, in a structure. You know, it's the we live in a society meme. It's like, well, we do.
We do, thank God. That's the
right. And I am anti anyone who is trying to undermine the basis of our beautiful society without trying to properly and healthfully reform it, which is what should happen. And there is plenty of, I am more than sympathetic to, there's plenty of good ideas in Marxism. There's plenty of good ideas from, I wouldn't say plenty of good ideas. There's some good ideas from Kimberly Crenshaw. And it's like, there is value to, she's the one who coined intersectionality and is kind of like the poster critical race.
I'll have to check it out because I would generally be a defender of intersectionality as a concept. I think
that's fair. Well, then the next time we cross paths, we can intersect on intersectionality. Because for those who don't know,
there's plenty of time.
Do you want to talk about it now? I told you I have a minor in gender studies, and I wrote a paper on it from which is a internal critique of intersectionality,
which makes you the expert.
That and in women's issues. So if there's any women watching, you've got any questions about women's issues, I am technically
that's a good Chappelle bit, isn't it?
I know,
it's women's movement needs.
That may have been at least 5% of the reason I got the degree.
Gotcha.
Okay. Here's my issue with intersectionality. Intersectionality is the claim that people exist at the intersection of multiple dimensions of identity. So like the original line that was there was class, bourgeoisie, proletariat.
What do you mean original? Sorry, is this chronological that you're describing?
It's being built out of the critical theory.
Come on. No, that's okay. You can do it. Just build me your theory of intersectionality.
I will spin up for you my narrative, and then you can tell me what you think of it. Okay.
Give me. Yeah.
So critical race theory coming out of critical theory from the Frankfurt School, which is Marxism, essentially. It's more complicated than that, but the basic idea is that people have multiple intersections of identity. So along different dimensions, and each dimension is a power relationship. So along each dimension, there's a dominant and subordinate identity. Those are the terms that Crenshaw uses, dominant and subordinate. So, for example, in terms of class, who has the dominant relationship, who has the dominant power relationship in that? It's the bourgeoisie, the upper class versus the lower class. Okay, but there's also, so that's one dimension. There's also a different dimension, like race. So you can have like white and then non-white is kind of the classic, white supremacist Eurocentric view of things. So so you can be white and poor, which is a different power differential than like black and rich, because it's not just wealth that's the only relevant dimension. Okay, so that's one dimension. Then there's the race dimension. Then you add another dimension, like sexual orientation, straight, non-straight. And then you add able-bodiedness. And then you just keep adding different dimensions of identity. And all of those dimensions, there's a dominant and subordinate pole, so to speak, right? So that's the fundamental claim of intersectionality. You have to take into account everyone's identity. We have to take into account all the canonical dimensions of identity. The problem with that is that it only takes into account like 5, 6, 7, at most 8 dimensions. Like, okay, you have race, class, sex, sexual orientation, able-bodiedness.
This is silly. Well, what you're describing, though, is the polar opposite of Jordan Peterson's critique, which I find not even a critique, right? Is what's the problem that intersectionality is going to find itself in, is that there's kind of infinite ways we can fracture ourselves.
Right, I'm recapitulating this critique.
Limited version of it. So, okay, I see. I guess I can see.
So what I'm saying is intersectionality, as it's understood and applied, focuses on those primary dimensions, class, race.
Undue emphasis.
Right, sure. But what it's missing, and this was my fundamental critique, is it's missing dimensions that are independent of power relations that have to do with a particular oppressor individual. Like, for example, or rather a systemic oppressor. So, for example, and I'm going to cite a very specific example here. Are you familiar with Sylvia Rivera?
No, I don't know who that is.
I should have fucking fact checked this. You know Stonewall riots?
Sure, okay. That's where a woman threw a brick, didn't she?
I believe Sylvia Rivera is a veteran of the 1969 Stonewall Inn uprising. Sylvia Rivera was an American gay liberation and transgender rights activist. Okay, so we studied Sylvia Rivera in gender studies.
Okay.
One of the things in her biography was that like her grandma tried to like poison her and like tried to kill herself and Sylvia at the same time.
God,
basically,
I'm laughing. It's terrible.
She had a horrific childhood.
Yes.
My critique was, how can you, when you're analyzing someone's intersectional identity, how can you not take into account experiential oppression? The oppression that you were faced, like from the way you were, like if you were bullied as a child, or how your parents were, or whatever infinite number of ways, like a brother was sick or someone. It's like the infinite number of ways in which you can experience oppression is not taken into account by the canonical intersectional categories, because they view everything in terms of subordinate and dominant relationships rather than like, well, those who've been abused as children and those who haven't. It's like, and even then you can divide all those forms of abuse up, right? And the ultimate conclusion of this is you just get to individuality. You take into account every individual's personal experience and all those canonical intersections. And that's a better way of looking at things. And that's the fundamental critique I have of intersectionality.
That's fair enough. I think there's some like contradiction immediately, like because we're talking about Peterson partially, right? So like one of the big things that I think is pretty notable.
I'm post Peterson now. Okay, I'm a Petersonian neo-Jungian, which is taking his philosophy.
I've noticed that because I've looked at what you praise me for sometimes, and you seem to hearken to the mythological, archetypical side of things, which actually it's not really my focus. I think I moved on beyond that a little bit.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm not interested in it, and I kind of want to talk about it, but I would say this is in contrast to like it's interesting. There's like there's a kind of like almost like there's like a presupposition within it that's like an assumption, and it's like utilitarian almost in nature. It feels almost inarguable in some ways, but not in others. It's just that like the generalizability of an idea makes it more valuable. Do you know what I mean? Like there's some reality to this, right? It's like that like if something like if and so I think with Peterson's philosophy, one of the things he's very concerned with is like kind of meta philosophy and like meta morality. And I think this is pretty potent, right? Especially under the guise of pragmatism. It's like, okay, yeah, pragmatism would say, how do I succeed in this conversation, right? And that's really to know, and you should know, right? But there's a larger question, which is how do I succeed in every conversation?
Right.
How do I succeed in the iterative conversations that you and me have over time? You know, so if I start lying to you, that's going to work for me maybe here, but it's not going to work in a further context when we have to continue to know each other. And lying to everyone else, everyone's connected. It's more complicated than that. So like you have to think of a kind of meta morality and a meta pragmatism. What's going to work like transferable across situations? I think Pirsig talks about this. I don't know if it's quoted from Poincaré in this thing, but that like the more general a fact is, the more valuable it is. And there's something kind of interesting about this because like it seems true, and yet, I mean, a general fact, I mean, doesn't really account for much when it comes to the particularities of a situation. Like the problem that I struggle with sometimes is like the individuality, the specificity, and the uniqueness is kind of exactly what makes something valuable and makes it like real. Like you know what I mean? Like, because reality is specific. It's not general. That's an abstraction. That's a rationalist abstraction, right? So it's kind of funny to think about like it's not like Peterson specifically loves generalizable identities and processes. He doesn't think that we should deal with everything on a case-by-case basis. It's not possible really cognitively. Like, so
interesting. I know what makes you say that he does not believe we should take things on a case-by-case basis? Because I would say as a pragmatist, that's exactly what he advocates for. You have to act in a manner that is pragmatic or beneficial long-term, but you have to evaluate each individual circumstance you're in as such.
That's always true. But this long-term thing, that's the generalization right there. That's the thing. That's some sort of like in a hierarchy, right? That's the more valuable thing that should confound the lesser order thing, right? Because the lesser order thing is if I could lie to you and have a beneficial situation. There's nothing not well, I mean, the thing that's not valuable about that is that it's underneath a higher order value, right? That's why I care so much about like hierarchy, right? Because you gotta have hires that subsume your lower values. Otherwise, I would be out here raping and pillaging. And I don't feel like doing that because I feel like it would cause me problems in the future. So Like, you know what I
An
mean?
accurate assessment. Yeah.
So the generalizability, as he would articulate, and this is the conservative position, like, why should you get married and commit to a partner? Is because this is going to benefit you long term, even though it subordinates your lesser order, immediate case to case desires. So generalizability is taken as a close to inherent good, I would say, in Peterson's work, and a lot of people's work. But it's a bit of a contradiction. I like Persig's angle on this because his weird concept of dynamic quality, it asks you to kind of surrender a lot of your like knowledge, and like it asks for a lot of humility and which I think is necessary when dealing with reality. Is like sometimes dynamic quality will cast its judgment on the particular, and you don't even get to know like if like the particularity and that mutation is your like revolutionary thought that's going to change generalizability, or if this is just one situation where you know what, it was actually better to take your dick out or whatever. You know what I mean? Like anyways, I don't remember exactly.
Well, I was going to say, I have been.
Oh, it's the particularity is because you're arguing that like the particularity. This is the thing about intersectionality is like these generalizations are very valuable. I mean, like you can't pretend that it's not you. Like you can't pretend that intersectionality or like we ain't free till all of us are free. I'm thinking of just blues wisdom and everything.
Sure, totally.
It's valuable, and it's also not. Like it's only sensical when you're dealing with like the civil rights movement in America, let's say in the 50s and 60s, to make it unambiguous. Like there is an oppressor and oppressed. There's a victim there. And it doesn't. Maybe it's not pragmatically useful to just think about yourself as a victim, which is why these incredible heroes of the civil rights movement are so empowered and creative and firm. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but you have to perceive like reality in this fashion to actually, you know, Jane Gatsby, who has influenced my thought because she was a very intelligent person that I respect greatly and put me on to, she lent me her copy of Zen of the Automotive Psychomaniacs. She deserves a lot of the credit for where I've ended up philosophically, even if we kind of have different interests, you know? But like, she cared a lot about cybernetics, not something I tend to care about. Like there's areas that she's particularly interested in that I'm not particularly interested in, but one of them is like cybernetics, which is that like you need to push on the right side of the thing to make the ship go in a straight line because of the environment, because of change and stuff like that, right? So like there are times where it's important to acknowledge there's a fucking victim and victimizer, and you should be pushing on the victim side to kind of equalize us and propel us forward in productive fashion. I'm happy to criticize people that present this kind of narrative when I feel like it's counterproductive to their goals. But, you know, like it's not invalid like on its face because it's predicated on power dynamics. Like that's obviously part of reality. Here's another weird thing about Peterson.
Power dynamics are real for sure.
Of course they are. And Peterson insists on the dominance hierarchy as an idea. There's a power dynamic. There's an idea of insisting all of reality is predicated on a kind of like literal hierarchical ordering of which the people at the top have the most power and deserve it. That's power theory. He mentioned in one of his things, it was around 2018-ish, right? It was a 12 Rules for Life lecture where he talked about that like really you should call it a competence hierarchy. Immediately this changes things radically, right? Because competence hierarchy has a kind of appeal to value in some transcendental sense. By the way, I'm not critical of the postmodernists. You know the Noam Chomsky and Foucault debate from 70 whatever? You ever watch that?
Parts of it.
Chomsky, I watched all of it. Chomsky was arguing about against Foucault's idea that of reducing things to a Marxist framework necessarily, because although I think it's justifiable, like as long as you live inside of a normative system, you can't really articulate concepts that are outside of the normative system. So they're arguing about justice. And so this is, let's harken to Jane Gatsby shit again, because this is where I know vaguely some of these things, right? This kind of Gödel, Escher, Bach, this like systems make sense inside of the systems. This is math. I don't know what this means, but the bottom line is like, there's a sense that we can only speak in the language within we exist, right?
Gödel's incompleteness theorem, I think you're referring to.
What?
Gödel's incompleteness theorem is something about
you
can only understand the rules within the context of the rules. It's some
precisely, and this veers into like language games of like Wittgenstein, Rorty, and Derrida, actually, right? So brilliant people, right?
Based Wittgenstein, cringe Derrida, but go ahead.
Why do you think cringe Derrida? Jordan Peterson told you
because Jordan Peterson said so.
Yeah, exactly. So he hasn't read any, so maybe think about it. But and also Cheryl Mezak would argue that Wittgenstein's an extension of pragmatism also. So and Rorty also is very postmodernist. I'm not necessarily a fan of this whole stuff, but you know, these are your bloodline. I don't know. You can't abandon your tradition. It's not right. That's the problem I have with Jordan Peterson. Sometimes he abandons philosophical
Yeah,
tradition.
well, he's been objectively wrong about Deleuze, in my opinion. So
did he talk about Deleuze? I've never heard him talk about Deleuze.
Well, to the degree that he lumps postmodernism altogether,
to the degree he doesn't know what postmodernism is, he just throws the term around and makes it sound like it's Marxist conspiracy, Jewish conspiracy. Like, it's not right. It's wrong. It's anti-intellectual. It's bullshit. It's the wrong thing to do with his position of authority.
He's a little too close to Ben Shapiro and Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, well, maybe you are too, you motherfucker, because you're starting this shit without knowing about it. I'm the only person that's read this goddamn book, it looks like. Okay, listen to me. It's the language game part of it is I understand the critique Foucault is making in this debate, because Foucault is saying that you can't actually articulate justice outside of a capitalistic influence when you're talking about justice inside of a capitalistic influence. Fair enough. However, Noam Chomsky says what I think is much smarter, which is like, I don't think we can do reality without like presuming that like our current prison system, as unjust as it may be, is an attempt, as feeble and flawed as it is,
yes,
at justice, some transcendental value.
There's correspondence. Yes.
What correspondence? Sorry, correspondence is a technical term that bothers me.
Well, I would say because the claim is, well, our entire societies are produced as a result of power games and the epistemic regimes, right? The
Certainly
discourse. That's exactly, certainly an element. But then the flip side, the Darwinian, and I would say the correspondence thing, which I'm using it wrong probably. Is that like, definitely. But like, our society is, prior to any sort of language games, was our evolutionary history, which was parameterized by objective forces like natural selection and sexual selection. And those things have bearing on the structure of our society as much, if not more, than the socio-cultural constructed aspect.
So this is what I feel weird about, is I feel intersectionality accounts for this and is quite brilliant in this regard. It's looking for this fractured identity. Essentially, it's a Deleuzian like rhizomatic structure you're describing when you talk about like intersectionality. Is we all, and the smartest, and I would hold it to like, and it's okay also if like what is called intersectional and people that parade around the ideology of intersectionality or the phrase even like that, they're not being effective in their. So the reason I'm saying it is because like I agree with Noam Chomsky. I'm very like an American philosopher, like, and I'm very pragmatist. Like I don't agree in that we can't even try to talk about these transcendental things because of the like implications of all of our intersecting identities and like the systems we live inside of our inability to break out of them. Like we can totally talk about them. I think they're more complicated than that these dynamic things. I don't think I'd see them as like it's like you're ever approaching zero. These Platonic concepts are important because they're pragmatically important to approach and to try to approach and to even state that you are approaching it, to state that value, even though you can't empirically, scientifically prove the existence of something like justice, truth, or beauty. So you still have to say it. It's very important to say
there's
it.
Something that's you have
there's
to
something
upon.
You're never gonna get it. It's okay. You're never
that's
gonna
why
get
That's why I like archetypes instead of Platonic forms, to the degree that I understand that differentiation.
How do you
archetypes are Platonic forms implies some like final structure, whereas the archetype is much more vague and is like it's a collection of. You can never represent an archetype in its essence, whereas a Platonic form.
That'd be blasphemy and idolatry. No,
right.
What's very interesting, what you're describing is the archetypical landscape of warring gods. That's how Jordan Peterson would put it. Different motivations we have, right? Another way to think of that gods, intersectionality is like these things exist in all of us, and we're all finding ourselves at weird axes of them. You know what I mean?
True.
That's what I'm saying.
And intersectionality. And intersectionality taken. The fundamental tenets of intersectionality, if you take them to their logical conclusion, I agree with, but it's
okay.
But my issue, pragmatically, I guess, is just most intersectional theorists do not do that. They stop at the 8 canonical identities that we describe all the time: class, race, able-bodiedness, stuff like that.
So
there's room to grow and develop.
Our kind of point on like maybe like wokeism and postmodern neo-Marxism. I'm not for things that don't seem to work. So I essentially think that because and let's put it this way, like Jordan Peterson, fiery coined postmodern neo-Marxism, is leading the culture war on this thing, right? Stephen Haidt, is it Stephen Haidt? Am I right that?
Stephen Haidt or Jonathan Haidt?
Jonathan Haidt. Sorry, I got it completely wrong. I was Hicks. I got crazy, but Jonathan Haidt, right? So again, what side of the culture war was I on in 2016? You know, I mean, I was not on the side of the professors being like, we need more conflict in universities and woke mind virus is killing knowledge and all that. I thought they were wrong because I believed in these intersectionality concepts, stuff like that. Not that I don't necessarily now, but Jonathan Haidt, I've been impressed by recently, and so I've been revisiting his older work, right? The reason is because in my own research, I've come to very strong conclusions about social media. By strong, I mean firmly held, like by me, like not saying that I'm, but and so what's curious is you managed to abandon your labels. It turns out me and Jonathan Haidt at present are perfectly aligned.
Moral foundations theory, based moral foundations theory.
What's that?
That's his theory of the different like dimensions of morality: care, harm, fairness,
right? Okay,
authority.
Which is kind of, to me, is similar, like Big Five personality.
People yes, yes.
What they believe politically. I think that's fine. That's not what I like Jonathan Haidt for.
Okay.
I like Jonathan Haidt for his latest research over the last couple of years, which has been actually my therapist recommended it to me because he was hearing what I was working on in terms of the like nonprofit I'm trying to get off the ground stuff, which is about just like phone use and its effect on the mind. It's just social media. It's very simple. And so what the reason I'm saying is because like Jonathan Haidt used to be on this like thing about the universities and the ineffectuality of like, let's say call it postmodern neomarxism or wokeism, whatever this movement is, this kind of tendency in universities to be like censorial and stuff. So he's been an outspoken opponent of that. The thing is, the difference between Jonathan Haidt and Jordan Peterson is Jonathan Haidt never bothered to employ this kind of conspiratorial thinking. He never got this like
loaded term, but go ahead.
Intensity. Oh, it certainly is loaded because that's the way that Jordan uses that. It's a big contributing
factor. No, he specifically says it's not conspiratorial, and he provides the evidence for it because it's not a group of people who got together and said, right, we're going to take out Western civilization.
They're possessed by the demonic, maternal,
devouring the ideology, just like Christian,
they're just possessed by demons. They don't even know it because they're too stupid. Think about the language he uses. You're being fucking stupid if you don't think. And also, you're literally incorrect. And I have a very long thing in the video that I already made about Jordan.
All right.
First 2 hours.
I'll have to.
I have a very long compilation of him specifically saying they know exactly what they're doing and they know exactly why they're doing it. The point of Bill C-16 in Canada was to hurt the largest amount of people possible because these are, and you're going to recognize all these terms, right? They're envious, resentful people that are lying to themselves and lying to the world. They're possessed by ideological pathology due to their hatred of God, hatred of humanity, the refusal of meaning and responsibility. These are words you've heard because he said them a lot.
I will be interested to see those clips.
Full of shit if you're pretending you didn't do that.
I'll be interested to see those clips juxtaposed to the clips of him saying it's not a conspiracy because it's how the ideology acts in people. Just like Christian ideology can say, well, no one is like, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to overthrow Western democracy and implement a Christian nationalist organization. There is a top-down aspect to that, sure. But there's also just the ideology tells people like, hey, being gay is bad and abortion's wrong. So naturally, what do you conclude from that? Oh, well, we should get together and advocate for these laws and do these things to obey the dictates of our ideology. But I recognize its nuance.
This is where I get very original, maybe, right? Okay. But here's my critique of Jordan Peterson is something verging on blasphemy. I think there's something weird about like the employment of archetypical language. So there's a speech he did in 2011 at the Mind Matters U of T conference. He has a beard and he's talking about like identifying like it's about pathology, but it's about identifying mental illness. It's largely about mental illness. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I've said it, I describe it so that in case you have watched it tacitly, but But the argument is like, what is mental illness? I said this thing to you before. I hope that I've qualified it with enough to make it funny enough. But like I said, like non-binary gender isn't real the same way ADHD isn't real, in that it is. But like I don't see the point of trying to objectively define it. I don't think that's the game that people are even trying to play. It doesn't seem useful. I don't see it, right? So he's essentially making the identical point about mental illness broadly, right? Is it ill of you to be depressed if you're in a situation that is so fundamentally depressing that it's the only justifiable thing? Like in an insane world, it is sane to be insane, something like that, right?
Yeah. Or if your child just died, are you mentally ill because of that? It's like,
no, right? Exactly, right? So it's much more complicated. And the point being that his point in that video is that sometimes psychiatrists are treating like identification of a mental illness the way that we identify a triangle, which is a classical category. Yeah. There's some sort of, even though Gödel's incompleteness theorem, there's some sort of rational, intrinsic, like self-contained model by which we can play and prove these things. things in real life, in these more affective regions, these things like depression, like the reason these are diagnosed is because we want to do something about it. We don't diagnose them just to say what this is. It doesn't make sense. We diagnose things because, like, I am diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I can't believe I messed up my own diagnosis. I'm diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I have been since I was about 19. And there's a reason I was diagnosed with that. It's so they could do DBT on me, because DBT is a kind of therapy created for people with BPD. The thing is, it works. You don't need to know the objective definition. You have a broad net. You're just like, BPD people, we're just kind of vibing it out. And our vibing it out has shown us that if you do DBT at them, they get better. So that's all we need to know about mental illness. Is that simple, right? So the conflict I would say I have with Peterson after all this research is, when you told him, I mean, Twitter is its own beast. It's fun to talk about it, but Twitter is, of course, where the worst of him comes out, and where the worst of, I would say, literally everybody comes out. So you can't I won't even criticize him for his tweets, because I think Twitter as medium is broken in some essential way.
Sure.
But like, he's out there. In your video, I clip it. You're gonna be in my video because I love this clip of you. Where you're like, he's out here literally just calling women bitches, but more than that, right?
Yeah, true.
He's publicly calling people embodiments of the devouring mother. So my question, in terms of pragmatic, pathological, psychiatric evaluation, is, what do you expect to happen in the world as a result of you declaring someone to be the embodiment of a literal mystic archetype? What's this for? What should we do about it? And this, to me, is pragmatically completely indistinguishable from conspiratorial thinking. It's war. It's the same reason I don't like a lot of leftist YouTubers, because their conclusion, I'll cite now Neil Postman's, like, amusing ourselves to death. I think it does a good job of, like, the transferability of information with our new technology makes it so that 90% of the news you hear has no normative implication for your behavior in your life. You can do nothing about it. It just feels intense, and you can do nothing with that emotion. I'm against this. So I'm against leftists doing these broad warlike calls to action that actually result in no concrete action in the people that they're, like, proselytizing to. That bothers me a lot. I love, like, I think I am a leftist when it comes to what I want to see happen in the world, but I'm not a fan of making people angry and afraid, convincing them that the best thing they can do about it is probably engage with more social media or post more on social media, which I think is capitalistic gain and mental illness writ large because of the advertising model of social media. End sentence. Or paragraph or monologue.
Regardless of how true it is, that is aesthetically based.
Beautiful. That's my only
concern. I would say that's evidence of its truthfulness.
I would agree.
All right, we got 10 minutes left. And I have more or less driven the conversation.
Incredible. Just keep me rolling.
That's true. We can do multiple iterations of this. It's not just this conversation.
Why are we doing multiple iterations? Maybe I don't want to come for a second stream. Maybe this is enough.
That's fair. That's a risk I have to be willing to take. Well, hold on. I want to give you, because we've talked for hour 10 minutes, or hour 20, and I have more or less steered it. Do you have anything that I forgot to give you the opportunity up front to publicly denounce me, as I give all my guests, including JJ McCullough.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I denounce PF Young in all his forms. No, I think I'm not interested in accruing an audience that polices me based on who I associate with or speak to necessarily. You know, I'm fine being judged by my own words, I guess, but you know, I don't want to have a life where people get mad if I talk to the wrong person. So I don't care that much about that. I think you're like, you know, not like you're the only person, but you talk about transgender people a lot for like a cis person. Like, I don't understand the point to some degree, but I get it. It's big in the cultural zeitgeist. I mean, I don't know. I don't agree with the things you say.
That's fair. I don't agree with so I want to give you an opportunity.
Yes.
Do you want to? Is there any specific thing that you want to talk about, or that I've said? You want to talk about this issue or other things, or what?
Issue? I think it's funny. I like calling it the transgender question because I think it's so similar. Like, that's important to people recognize that.
Yeah, the question.
What do I? Well, no, I think the non-binary thing is kind of entertaining. I guess I'm curious about that because I put on the hat to bother you.
It doesn't bother me.
Okay.
Well, all right. So let me ask. Let me ask you then.
Yeah. What's up?
Because would you say you're non-binary?
Yes, I identify as non-binary.
Okay, I'm also non-binary.
That's very cute of you.
Now hold on. No, I do, and I mean it in a way that is fundamentally different from the right-wing, like, alpha male group who's like, "There's only one way to be a man," stuff like that. Well, what is when you say you're non-binary?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Even though, because earlier you just said to even objectively define it is kind of defeats the purpose. But like,
yes, yeah.
What is I guess what's the pragmatic purpose of calling yourself non-binary?
Make it three things. To just immediately kind of just separate it maybe usefully. I would say there's like procedural knowledge. I'm using maps of meaning terms here. There's procedural, people act things out before they understand them and can articulate them. And I see nothing wrong with that. I would say that there's an external and an internal world you're also describing. That's what I know about non-binary people, as far as I can perceive it, right? So let's put it this way. Like it's so okay. So well, okay, this is what breaks down for me. It gets so confusing to me to some degree. You called me because you're a nice person. And you called me and you were like, you identify as non-binary. So do you use they pronouns? Because you're trying to understand the people you speak to. You don't want to cause nightmares in the world or anything. Because you're a nice person.
I try
to be. But you heard that he is on one side of my slash in my pronouns, right? And you were kind of like, oh, thank God. And you were like, Mr. Sir, dude, it's dandy, right?
My brother in Christ.
and also I laughed too because you said you identify as non-binary, and I was like, do I not look like I identify as non-binary? And you were like, you want my honest opinion? Which I think is funny.
Fair.
But that's the part that I think interests me. Maybe is like, do I not, based on your phenomenological assessment of the world, without having to objectively define things, right? You're a person that believes in postmodern Neomarxism and wokeism as concepts, as spirits that can possess people without their knowledge, that people can participate in the construction of without even like intending to, right? So you know what a non-binary person might look like, right? Like you know, like a woke person might look like, right?
I know what a gender. I don't want to use a term that's outdated. Is gender bending still okay to say? Can you say?
I think that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. So you
fine.
like,
not that I'm the arbiter, but
well, so this is my thesis.
Yes.
In my video titled "I'm coming out as non-binary."
Oh, you're doing that? You cunt. You're such an asshole. Like,
sex, male and female, and intersex.
There's a little judge to it though. It can be forgiven.
I know. It's in my opinion, humor is the sign of quality, a sign of truth.
Humor is very powerful in that manner.
Male and female, relative, bimodal, but effectively binary, because there's very few intersex people. But there are male and female are pretty.
You're right. Yeah,
fundamental binaries.
I don't like that. I don't like when people are talking about non-binary identities to bring up intersex people and like two-spirited people. Like it's fine because that's real, but it's such a small slice that I feel like what is postmodern neo-Cartesianism. They're trying to find some objectivity to appeal to justify.
I see. Yes.
And I think that's meaningless. Who cares? I don't think that matters. It can be existent.
But then gender, when I think of gender, I think of a spectrum with feminine and masculine.
Yeah, of course. Archetypically, probably.
Archetypically, yeah. Animus is not exactly the map on, but like kind of it is, because Jung would argue that like, a super feminine man has strong identification with his anima. So maybe it's anima animus, whatever. Masculine, feminine in sort of the traditional sense. That's a spectrum. You can be a male or a female, and you can end up pretty much anywhere on that spectrum from masculine to feminine. And no one, or very few people, are like totally masculine or totally feminine.
Of course, and the archetypical constraints, right? Like,
right, and the very
you take pains to emphasize that it's like the mythologically masculine, mythologically feminine are different. I would defend Campbell in similar terms. Like it's okay for that to exist, and then for people in the modern to exist, however.
And the very reductive, one-dimensional fools like Andrew Tate and the kind of alpha male crew, who are like, there's only one way to be a man. You have to do these, and these things. It's like they're assuming that you can only be masculine in some binary sense. There's one idea of masculinity.
Yeah.
And any deviation from that, like, oh, you listen to, this music, or you watch that show, or you do these things, or it's like, well, then you're not really, it's like everyone is non-binary because everyone falls somewhere along the spectrum of masculine and feminine. And so when someone says I'm non-binary, I guess my question is, what information is being added by that identification that I don't already know? In that, of course, you can be a male or female and be interested in all manner of feminine / masculine things.
Yeah. Okay.
That's sort of my central thing. And then I guess I just don't know what the they them signifies. Because like you said, well, do I look non-binary? And it's like,
yeah,
sure. You look, I'm going to take a wild guess and say you were born male. And present in the way that you do, which is not, classically right. So then what's with the they them? Isn't it still he him?
Right.
That's my question.
Well, I'll allow my. I was trying to decide whether or not to give myself a caveat, which is just that like I keep the he on one side of my bio, for that's a personal thing. Sometimes it may be entertainingly, it's also like it's pragmatic, but also maybe entertainingly it's cowardice, which is cute. But I think that's a fair enough question. I think that like non-binary identities and they them usage for people. I have a really large size of my audience that goes by they them pronouns. I just keep, there's so fucking many. And also in my social circle, like it's musicians and so many fucking they thems, it's ridiculous. It's like at some point, like because this is just a kind of like a philosophical logical thing, right? It's like if everyone starts using they them pronouns, we might as well like maybe shift to like just using gender is about sex or whatever, right?
Yeah, so it's syndrome when everyone's super.
Yes, yeah, and that's important. I have a little pet philosophical theory. I call it the inversion of significance, but it's that. It's like if no art is perfect, that's another thing people say. Nothing is perfect. I'm like, well, then we're now existing on a spectrum about perfection that rapidly approaches here without touching it. That's fine, but we should use it accurately. So anyway, so with non-binariness, it's a little bit entertaining. The thing is, I would posit like, again, there's like a lot of different, but like, first of all, I don't think it's a threat. I think it's a really primary thing. A threat.
You don't think what's a threat?
Non-binary,
like the usage of they them.
Yeah, I'm not perceiving it as some threat. I understand the philosophy of why something would be a threat if you challenge the presumptions of really base level mythology. I'm just talking about Jordan Peterson stuff right now, but like I can kind of, but I don't really see it as a threat. I see non-binary people are perfectly capable of navigating in the world. There's a lot of like, there's enough pragmatic utility. The idea hasn't died, right? Like you think about Tumblr 2014. What did they had Mogai. They threw about 80 pronouns on the universe, right? And 100% of them died, except for they, them, has some legs. There's a reason. I think it's because it has some literary precedent. Like, you know, if you find someone's wallet and you don't know whose it is, you go, this person's wallet, I don't wish they knew where they were or whatever, right? So there's some precedent, not to say it's the same as using it for someone in the singular. That's an innovation, probably. And it's fine to innovate, though. I think that's fine. Furthermore, I think that non-binary identities are, I call them internal and external, right? Like, I don't agree with that like everything is based 100% off of your internal identification, because that's the individualism I don't agree with. Things are very social. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Gender is very, very social. That's the entire premise of, I'm curious if you care about this, because some people are so resistant to this. Like, can you play within the supposition that sex and gender are separate? Maybe.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
my whole critique of a lot of the far left stuff is that they say both are socially constructed categories that don't exist or that don't exist.
I think that's strange, because one of them's pretty solid. Where when people talk about sex, they're talking about often what genitals you have, and they're also very intrinsically linked. It's not that they can't be separated, though. Not that it's even like, not that they aren't very separated, especially in today.
Yeah, they are linked, but they are separate. But like the term "sex assigned at birth" is exactly.
Of course, and trans people
implying that it's
use this often to indicate things, to communicate with each other.
Yeah,
trans people are under no illusion about what sex they were born as. That's the
so this is where I disagree, and I think
I'm so curious. I need to know. I'm so curious. Do you know any?
You are absolutely
friends with any trans people.
You are absolutely right.
I need to know. You're not, are you?
Say it again. What did you say?
Do you know any trans people? Do you have any trans friends, family?
I thought if you say I have friends that are XYZ, it just proves that you're even more of a
oh my god, I'm so woke
than anything.
No, I just think it's so interesting. I have it about Jordan Peterson too. I apologize. It's okay. You can have anything to talk to it.
Thank you. I've had conversations with several transgender people on this show.
Okay, yeah. I'm curious.
And they are absolutely under no illusion of the sex they were.
I haven't met a single trans person or non-binary person that is under any illusions about their sex.
Fair enough. On the Daily Show, she is I think it's Rachel McKinnon or she's a transgender athlete, and I even don't like using the term she. He, because he is a biological male, says
pronouns are for sex.
Says I am a biological female, even though he was born a male.
Oh, sure.
And that is being cheered upon on Trevor Noah. And I'm not saying Trevor Noah is the epitome of left-wing cultural production. I am highly suspect of that.
Everything is cheered upon. That's a bad show. People just like that's their job.
Fair.
Is to scream and cheer.
But I cite that clip as, hey everyone, and you've seen my criticism of Matt Walsh. I think it's fucking bullshit.
Yes.
When the conservatives are like, well, no adult is allowed to medically transition, and
that's not libertarian, and that's weird, and it doesn't.
Well, yeah, sure, not libertarian. Yeah, but fair enough. And then also you brought it up, the Blair White, Ben Shapiro conversation, where it's like,
Yeah.
Ben, if I'm in a restaurant and you need to say like, hey, my seat is over by that person, are you going to refer to me as he or she? And he like stumbles over himself. He's like, well, I guess it'd be she. It's like, yes, duh. That's the reality I live in. If you look like a woman, in my subjective view, then I have no problem calling you using she, her pronouns. And in fact, I would say these, I'm going to use this term to appeal to TERFs.
Oh, okay.
TERFs,
All right. Let's get
who
the
will say, there are TERFs who will say, under no circumstance will I refer to Blair White as a she, her. It's like, okay, well then you're just as much trying to impose on my language as someone who demands that someone who is,
that makes sense.
And someone who makes zero attempt whatsoever to, appeal to the other end of the masculine feminine spectrum is like, well, I demand you call me a she, her. It's like, well, I'm not going to do that either.
Right. I would say, and because I would hearken to the objectivity in our video, I appreciate in some sense that you care about my feelings about art and you kind of reference them, because I hope that people that are following me can see that that's really where everything stems from, is that I care a lot about art and I care about beauty. And that's how I ground every single thing that I think is about pursuit of beauty. I would say that, well, I would say two things maybe. I would say that like people that are transgender or non-binary that are, or any other gender that they like identify with, those people that are ending up in these kind of militaristic situations, my concern like for them is they're not like happy. They're not well, because like if you have to live your life in a militarized mindset and potentially because society isn't kind enough to them, I'm truly mean this, right? Like we as a society don't want a situation. This is what the situation seems to be sometimes that conservatives are very afraid of, and people that don't like all this gender game stuff are afraid of, right? Is that there's a transgender person, they're 16 years old, and they're rejected by society, and everyone doesn't like this thing, and they're afraid, and they're very afraid, and the only people that are on their side are like 17-year-olds, and then they have to go reinvent society Lord of the Flies style and like create philosophy and try to live, right? And there's no solution to that I see besides making people less afraid and increasing acceptance and normalization of such things so that people can at least experience these fucking things, right? So there's one thing. I have a lot of sympathy for people like similarly as I would, and you might notice, I think JJ said this to you, right? There's continuity in terms of like liberation, like language, let's say, about marginalized groups throughout history, right? Like a lot of the arguments, it's hard to ignore and it feels bad. And not to say that it's some sort of an objective category, but like a lot of people have said this about civil rights in the 60s. It's like, well, yeah, we freed the slaves, but now they're going too far, right? So I think people say a lot of similar things about LGBTQ people, including like trans people sometimes. And so it's hard to ignore that because that's not a strong position pragmatically. It has failed often and often is associated with great sins of humanity. I think this is true. So we have to be somewhat cautious. I understand when people are cautious around that. And so I also understand the overcorrective, which is that, and this is my critique, if it's a critique, it's not a critique, but like of trans people, is like they need to appeal to some objective like correspondence theory of truth to prove their validity to succeed in this debate. I wish that they could let go of this. I don't see people able to let go of this unless they feel safe and trusted and that there's better avenues available to them. I feel tragedy and sorrow in my heart when people feel the need to resort to kind of militaristic language and behaviors. That's not good, right? I don't like when people insist that militaristic language is good because it's necessary, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So the world that I seek to create, I love representation in media and art and stuff like that. I love people. I'm interested in people's experience. I want them to have like a higher level of care and so that they can like manage this shit. So the part that I'm talking about is like in the objective versus subjective. This is at least a dichotomy that, or a duality that is just part of, if you're a non-binary person or a trans person or whatever you are, it doesn't matter what you are. If like what you feel like and what the world sees you as are sometimes different, right? I think they're both valid. Care if someone is transgender or non-binary or doesn't matter what pronouns they are and they speak to me and they say how they feel, then I take that as I'm a curious person, information about who they are that is relevant. And I also don't care that much to try to police them on what pronouns they try to get other people to use or they identify with. I'm happy to use people's pronouns. I know one vaguely. I don't even know them. No one knows people in the pronouns, to be honest. Like everyone's arguing about all the time. It doesn't even come up. I know one tangentially person that maybe had it pronouns. I used it pronouns in the text about it. whatever, right? I know, whatever. It's hard to care, right? The reason non-binary people have some legs is because it's possible to learn to use they pronouns. It's possible. It works. People can do it. I think that it requires a community of people that are all using they pronouns. I don't think pronouns are utilizable in some brute force individualistic way. I think that pronouns become normal and usable when you're amongst a community of people that all use the same pronouns for the same person. You know what I mean? If you spend your life like sitting in the corner trying to get your pronouns right, you're going to fail because it's social. It's social. And so anyways, and then on top of that, I would say with non-binary things, right? People might complain that, oh, non-binary identity, oh, you just identify as non-binary. Well, okay, they're telling you information about how they perceive themselves, how they'd like you to try to perceive them is how I feel when people tell me that. That's information, even if it's procedural and not semantic. It's not explicit. It's not philosophical in some way, but there's something, right? And then it comes with this insinuation that feels like a discreditation where it's like, and, well, what, do we have to retroactively think Prince is non-binary? I would say, yeah, like sure, right? He looks like non-binary, right? Who knows if he was born today, if he identifies non-binary? But like, there's an external and an internal component. They're both totally. Matter, you know?
And I, like I said, oh my, there's such a split in my soul when I say this. I am non-binary, and so is everyone else.
But you're not in the external sense, or the
but I am.
Sense.
Well.
Would you prefer if I use they pronouns for you rather than
see, that's what this is the issue is, does non-binary, can you be non-binary and go by he, him pronouns?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess you'd have to
Who decides these rules? That's my point.
But that's fine because then for what you just introduced, then yeah. Oh no, everyone's non-binary. That's always been true.
Well, that's my thing. I just don't.
That's fair enough. But when someone says they're non-binary, I'm non-binary, right? What does that normatively mean? So this is the Peircean pragmatic model of meaning. It's this implication for behavior. Peterson would also say emotion is implication for behavior, right? That's where meaning actually is. And so the implication for behavior is I'm non-binary. So, to perceive me, like I probably feel a little weird about my gender, like in terms of like, if I'm grouped in with men, I might not fit in with men. I go to a queer church. I don't even fit in with the 60-year-old gay men there because they're so masculine and it's weird. It's almost awkward. It's always been, just to be honest, it's an accurate description of my reality. And it's prescriptive in that I feel good when people use they pronouns for me. So that's it. Is there's a
I'm gonna be completely dead honest with you.
Yeah.
Because I respect you and I regard you as an S tier. I'm not going to use this term, S tier Enlightened Centrist. I do regard you as a genuinely good artist and scholar or philosopher, scholar, whatever you want to say, who conveys actual useful, valuable information. I can sense in myself, and I've caught myself when I'm referring to you, like talking to JJ, I'll say they about you again, like unconsciously.
Right.
Because I know that you, or at least I don't know, but now I know, but my inclination, which is correct, is that if I refer to you as he, you're not going to say, hey, stop. It's actually they, them. And I'd ask that you call me they, them. Because as soon as that happens, then the conversation we're having is nothing to do with whatever the genuinely interesting topic we're talking about. Then it's now this is a bit of a power game. And that's what that's what I'm very strongly am like, I'm not calling people they, them because I can accept all of those things that you just said that were important to you about you being non-binary and about how you fit in. And I'm not going to change my fundamental category of language solely to accommodate someone's feelings, because I do not believe the accommodate someone's feelings is the ultimate justification, because then it literally just becomes, well, what if someone wants to be referred to as I'm against that. I just straight up do not believe in calling another human being an it. It's just, there is something religious / metaphysical about, like, I'm not referring to a toaster in the same way that a human, I know my inner Christian, my Christian adjacency spills forth. I'm not calling anyone an it. And Zimzer, these same things. It's like at a certain, or bugs. It's like at a certain point.
The Zizher, I've met maybe one person that was Zizher, Jim. I think the bottom line is it doesn't really work. They, them has some legs.
Well, okay, but right there, but even that, you notice that you're doing what I'm doing just at a different gray line.
That's fine.
And that's my point, is like, if you can respect that I am not super excited to refer to an individual as they, but it's not like, well, I'm not going to engage in conversation with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Then it's like, well, you know what? I'm kind of half inclined just to call you they just because you're showing me respect. And like,
Fair,
oh, well, that's
fair
a contradictory kind of egocentric thing. It's like, okay,
No, I don't
well,
think that's a contradictory.
it's
That's
both
why I'm calling
contradictory
you,
and
because
egocentric.
you're
That's
very kind to me in your videos. So
well,
maybe I would take interest to you if you weren't kind to me. I think that's a perfectly valid reason to do with it.
yeah,
I believe very strongly in emboldening people's capacity for persuasion and beauty. I think that's the answer. I don't think being right is the answer. I think being beautiful is the answer. And I think that there's kind of constraints and patterns of that. That's why I like the pragmatism, and I'm appreciative of Peterson's view in many ways. Is like the bad things don't work and they die. Like you have to have some faith. You know what I mean? Like it seems weird to me that the conspiratorial thing starts to kick in, especially when it's like they're trying to destroy gender and kill us all, like our spirits and stuff like that. And I'm like, do you believe in God, man? Like, do you believe in God? Like, do you believe that like masculine and feminine are such powerful, archetypical, millions of years old ideas that they're going to persist? Because you can't kill them if that's the case. You're not going to kill them. You know what I mean? I don't think you will. I don't think people will. And then, do you believe in God? Like, I have to be honest with you. Like, it's Zizur pronouns, which all respect to, you know, Jem, and I don't know how the them of its works, but like
anybody does.
But like there's some pragmatic failures in how that deals with reality and life. You know what I mean? It doesn't quite pan out. The thing is, I've seen they them people work fine. You know what I mean? And also when they them people feel safe enough, they're totally fine with talking about like whether they have a penis or vagina when it comes to the moment of if they have a period or not. Like if this, like I've not met people that struggle with this except for they're militarizing in reaction to people that are saying that they're destroying the world. And that's
that is what I think my fundamental problem is, and it's not like it's happened to me specifically where someone is like,
it certainly hasn't, has it? It hasn't happened to Jordan Peterson either. It was on Firing Line, and Michaela said in a written interview that they've never been asked to use they them pronouns for someone. And that's what I think is interesting. That's the reason I say, do you know anyone? It's not because you have to have any thoughts. It's because it's curious how much energy goes into this issue for people that never pragmatically deal with it. And then for people that know non-binary people, they're aware procedurally before articulation, perhaps, there's not a real danger to society issue here. There's sometimes this with ideas, but that's my problem is, what I'm curious about you is I'm like, I'm right here. You know me. You know what I mean by non-binary very broadly. The same way I know
think I do, but I don't know what you mean by they them. That's my issue.
It's literally just a third category. Like it's literally something that isn't he, it isn't she, and you can use in a sentence and has worked in the past. That's as far as I'm not trying to make a grand statement.
Right. That's my, and the fact that you're not is
I hung out with the they them on my couch earlier today. My friend Gabby. They go by they them pronouns now, right? Or they're trying them out, right? And then they came upon they them pronouns the same way I did, which was that like I wanted to try it. The thing is, for me, actually, I felt way more guilty. I wanted to try. I was feeling like I don't really identify with gender. I've always had these conflicting feelings. Maybe this would feel good. Maybe this would feel right. Maybe this is smart. I don't know. What happened with me is one of my friends was texting me and they're like, you know, we just try it. Like, it doesn't like matter. It doesn't really impact my life, right? If I just try that. And so I let it happen. And it hasn't died. That's how pragmatic ideas survive.
I'll end with this. Fair. Yeah. I'll end with this. The most pragmatic cost to you going by they them is that I cannot as confidently say, CJ, my brother in Christ. And I love that term. I call you brother in Christ. Because what is it? My sibling in Christ? It's like, okay, I'm hearkening to the ancient roots.
Wait. Let me give you one more thing of Jordan Peterson defense here, right? Because I like talking about this. I go to a queer church, and so they sometimes rewrite hymns to have gender inclusive language. And fair enough. But I gotta say, like, one of the things of Jordan Peterson's thing is like interacting with culture is weird and complicated. I'm being too controversial. Maybe I shouldn't with my own audience, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's like Peterson would argue the long history of patriarchal concepts is very powerful, and you can't just throw away that language, right? I have to say, there's a song, you know, holy, holy, holy Lord God Almighty, you know, like holy, holy, holy Lord God Almighty. So anyways, we had it in my church, and we said we changed Lord for our God Almighty. And I had a real sense where I was like, the patriarchal energy works really well there, of like being able to gaze at, you know, this kind of scary thing that's almost problematic, right? But it is even in the archetypical sense, right? It's like, man, sometimes the gender of God really does something to you, depending on what you're using. Anyways, I just wanted to validate that. Like brother in Christ, like sometimes there's you got to be able to know the power of these things.
To the roots, yes.
Yeah, these old archetypical ideas.
All right, CJ, we've been talking for an hour and 45, and it's not nearly long enough. And listen, if this is the last time and only time we come into public contact, so be it. The gods will see it fit. But if a future discussion is warranted, perhaps whether or not we live in a patriarchy,
I think the thing
that might
is,
be an interesting conversation.
is I feel this way about a lot of people I interact with, where I'm hopeful for their careers and stuff like that. Is I want you to succeed, but I want you to succeed because you succeed. I don't want you to succeed because you have JJ and CJ on your fucking thing. You know what I
That's
mean?
true. I also JJ's audience bullies me a lot, and I suspect
Yeah,
your audience is going to bully me a lot. So
maybe.
maybe I'll start talking to. I'm going to go bring some local theologians from the local diocese around
Well,
here.
this is where what JJ says about you kind of kicks in as almost a problematic concept. I say it's like it's a business thing. It's a value capture thing. It's like, where are you going to find success? I want you to find success, Paul. But the hard thing about centrists that I find that mean it
Enlightened
is,
Centrist.
oh, excuse me. Yeah. Is where's your market? Who are you speaking to?
I
Do
don't
you
think of it
know?
that way. I don't
You
think
should.
about.
You should.
You know
That's
why? You know why? I'll give you a
your
brutally
objective side.
cynically
Yes.
answer.
Yes.
I am privileged in the real sense when it comes to finances. So
So you don't give a fuck
market,
if you win or not.
YouTube revenue, irrelevant to me. I'm interested in putting my archetypically epic ideas out there and
It's
seeing what
hilarious.
happens.
Right, you don't
Yeah.
give a fuck. Okay, well, if you don't care if you succeed or fail, then there's nothing I can tell you.
Well, I do care if I succeed or fail, but certainly not in the capitalistic.
Succeed or fail by what metric then? What is your pragmatic goal? What teleology will you adjust your being to climb towards?
That is a good question. I wrestle with that quite often.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't figure it out about you. It makes you hard to pin down. It makes me and JJ go on your fucking podcast.
Well, then I'll have to leave it open-ended.
Ugh, I don't know if I agree.
All right, everyone. This has been a phenomenal conversation. Phenomenological conversation, I would say.
Ooh, look at that.
Procedural and participatory knowing has occurred over the course of this conversation.
How about it?
All right, everyone. Thank you very much. And we may or may not speak again.
Hey, Paul, can I say in front of everybody?
Please.
I think your League of Legends videos are very funny, and I think you have a kind of interesting angle, and I hope you do well, because you seem like you have a good heart, and that matters a lot.
That's what my therapist said. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, CJ. Peace.